The encounter at Gate 14. It was a brisk autumn morning at Evergreen International Airport. The rhythmic hum of luggage wheels on tile floors and the occasional announcements over the intercom filled the air. Passengers hurried through the terminal, some clutching coffee cups, others juggling toddlers and boarding passes. At Gate 14, a flight attendant, Clara James, stood with her arms crossed. Her pressed uniform, pristine and sharp, complemented her no-nonsense expression. Clara was known for her efficiency, but there was an unspoken edge to her presence that many passengers found unsettling. In the crowd approaching Gate 14, a couple stood out, but not in the way one might expect. Marcus and Lila Thompson were professionals in their mid-30s, exuding a quiet elegance. Marcus wore a tailored blazer over a casual shirt, his dark skin glowing under the overhead lights. Lila, with her natural curls framing her face, donned a soft beige trench coat and carried a sleek leather tote. Their laughter intertwined as they chatted, their chemistry palpable. They were returning home after attending a charity gala in the city, a brief respite from their otherwise demanding lives. As they approached the gate, Lila noticed Clara's gaze fixating on them. It wasn't the casual glance of someone scanning the crowd, but something more deliberate, almost disapproving. She nudged Marcus gently. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. Marcus followed her gaze and saw Clara's eyes narrow. "Maybe she's just having a bad day," he replied, brushing it off. But Lila wasn't convinced. Years of navigating subtle and overt prejudice had honed her instincts, and something about Clara's stare felt more than just a bad mood. When they reached the boarding pass scanner, Marcus handed over both passes with a polite smile. "Good morning." Clara didn't return the smile. Instead, her eyes darted between the couple and their boarding passes. She scanned the passes slowly, her fingers deliberately pressing each button as if searching for a problem. "You're flying business class?" she asked, her tone laced with skepticism. "Yes," Marcus replied, keeping his voice calm despite the tension creeping into the exchange. "Is there a problem?" Clara pursed her lips. "It seems there's been a mistake. I don't see your names on the list." Lila frowned. "That can't be right. We checked in online, and our passes were issued without any issues." Clara's gaze flickered over them again, her demeanor growing colder. "I'll need to verify this with the system. Step aside, please." Other passengers began to murmur, some glancing at the couple with curiosity, others with pity. Marcus felt the weight of their stares, but maintained his composure. He had dealt with moments like this before, instances where he was made to feel like he didn't belong, despite his accomplishments. Lila, however, was less inclined to remain silent. "This is absurd," she said, her voice firm. "We've done everything by the book. There's no reason for us to be singled out like this." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, I'm just following protocol." "Protocol?" Marcus interjected. "It seems like your protocol applies selectively." Clara's eyes flashed with irritation. "Sir, I suggest you lower your voice. If you can't cooperate, I'll have to call security." By now, the tension at Gate 14 was palpable. Passengers whispered among themselves, and a few pulled out their phones to record the interaction. Among them was Emily Sanderson, a young journalist traveling to cover a political summit. She had a knack for spotting stories, and her instincts told her this was one worth documenting. As Marcus and Lila stood their ground, Clara called over her supervisor, Mr. Alan Grayson. A middle-aged man with a kind but tired face, Alan approached with a wary expression. Clara quickly explained the situation, her words painting the couple as uncooperative and suspicious. Alan turned to Marcus and Lila. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," he began, his tone measured. "But we'll need a few minutes to sort this out. Please step aside." Marcus clenched his jaw, but Lila placed a calming hand on his arm. "We'll wait," she said, her voice steady but firm. As the couple moved to the side, Clara shot them a look of triumph, one that did not go unnoticed by Emily. She began typing furiously on her phone, determined to capture not just the event, but the undercurrent of discrimination that seemed to fuel it. Minutes turned into what felt like an eternity. The boarding process continued for other passengers, each one passing by the Thompsons with sympathetic or judgmental glances. Ellen returned eventually, holding a tablet. "There's no mistake," he admitted, looking at the couple apologetically. "Your tickets are valid." "I'm not sure what caused the confusion." Leela's eyes locked on Clara. "I think we both know what caused it." Ellen sighed, visibly uncomfortable. "Let's not jump to conclusions." But Leela wasn't about to let it slide. Jump to conclusions? We were humiliated, accused, and publicly shamed for no reason. Do you think that just happens randomly? Before Ellen could respond, Clara interjected. "I was simply doing my job. If they felt embarrassed, that's on them." Marcus, who had been holding back, finally spoke. Your job is to provide fair and equal treatment to every passenger. What you did was far from that." The exchange drew the attention of a senior airline representative who had been passing through the terminal. Tall and imposing, Claire Benson was known for her no-tolerance policy on discrimination and misconduct. She approached the scene with a commanding presence. "What's going on here?" she asked, her sharp tone cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Ellen tried to explain, but Leela stepped forward. "What's going on is that your employee decided we didn't look like we belonged in business class and tried to deny us boarding." Claire's eyes narrowed as she turned to Clara. "Is this true?" Clara stammered, her confidence faltering under Claire's scrutiny. I was just following protocol." Claire didn't seem convinced. She gestured to Ellen. "Let's take this to the office." As the group moved away, Emily continued filming discreetly, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and determination. She had seen too many stories of injustice, but this time she felt compelled to ensure the truth reached the world. Marcus and Leela finally boarded the plane, but the weight of the experience lingered. They couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. And they were right. What began as an encounter at Gate 14 would soon spiral into a story that would shake the airline to its core. The storm begins to brew. As Marcus and Leela finally took their seats in business class, the tension in their chests refused to ease. Lila gazed out of the window, watching the ground crew bustle around the aircraft. The hum of passengers settling in, the clinking of seatbelts, and the flight attendant's announcements all seemed distant. Marcus reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You okay?" he asked softly. Leela turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just can't believe we were treated like that. It's 2025, Marcus. This shouldn't still be happening." Marcus nodded, leaning back in his seat, trying to suppress his frustration. "I know, baby. But we're here now. Let's just try to enjoy the flight." But even as he said the words, Marcus could feel the weight of the incident pressing down on him. He could see Clara a few rows ahead, moving through the aisles, pretending as if nothing had happened. The very sight of her made his blood boil. Across the cabin, Emily Sanderson, the journalist who had recorded the incident, scrolled through her phone. The video she had captured at the gate was already gaining traction after she uploaded it to her social media with the caption, "Denied boarding for being successful. A black couple faces public humiliation at Evergreen International. Watch what happens next. #Equality Matters, #discrimination. Within minutes, comments flooded in. Some were outraged, others skeptical. "This is unacceptable. We need accountability. Are we really still dealing with this kind of treatment in 2025? Bet they were causing trouble and playing the victim card. Hope they sue the airline." Emily leaned back in her seat, watching the numbers rise. Something told her this story was going to blow up. She made a mental note to follow up with Marcus and Leela after the flight. Meanwhile, back at Evergreen Airlines headquarters, in the sleek, glass-walled office of CEO Daniel Carter, an alert popped up on his screen. His executive assistant, Jenna, rushed in with a worried expression. Sir, we have a situation. A video from one of our flights is going viral. Daniel frowned. What kind of video? Jenna placed a tablet in front of him. It's about a discriminatory incident involving a couple and one of our flight attendants, Clara James. It's already been shared thousands of times. Daniel hit play, his expression hardening as he watched the footage. The words exchanged, the condescending tone from Clara, the discomfort on Marcus and Leila's faces. It was all there, captured for the world to see. "This is bad," he muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Get me the head of PR. Now." Jenna nodded and hurried off. Daniel stared at the screen again, his gut twisting. He had worked hard to position Evergreen Airlines as a leader in customer experience and inclusivity. This one incident threatened to undo years of progress. Back on the plane, as the flight reached cruising altitude, Clara made her way through the cabin, offering drinks with a forced smile. When she reached Marcus and Lila's row, she hesitated. Marcus met her eyes, his stare unwavering. Leila, however, wasn't in the mood for subtlety. "Not even an apology?" she asked coldly. Clara's lips pursed. "I was just following protocol." Leila laughed, a dry and humorless sound. "You keep saying that. You mean you were following your own assumptions?" "Ma'am, I'm just here to ensure you have a pleasant flight." "Well, you failed spectacularly," Marcus chimed in, his voice steady but firm. "We'll be speaking to your superiors." Clara's face tightened, and she moved on without another word. The tension lingered throughout the flight, but it wasn't just between Marcus, Leila, and Clara anymore. Other passengers had taken notice, whispering and casting glances. Some offered quiet nods of support, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The landing and the fallout. By the time the plane landed at their destination, Marcus and Leila had made up their minds. They were going to file a formal complaint and pursue legal action if necessary. As they disembarked, Emily approached them. "Excuse me," she said gently, showing them the video. "I posted this earlier, and it's already going viral. I'd love to interview you both for my platform if you're interested." Leila looked at Marcus, and he nodded. "We'll consider it," she said, exchanging contact information with Emily. At the baggage claim, a representative from the airline was waiting for them. Alan Grayson, the supervisor from earlier, looked nervous as he approached. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he said, clearing his throat. "I just wanted to personally apologize for the misunderstanding at the gate." Leila folded her arms. "Misunderstanding? That's what you're calling it?" Alan's face turned red. I understand how it looked, and I assure you we'll be conducting an internal review." "That's not enough," Marcus said. "We were humiliated in front of dozens of passengers. How do you plan to make this right?" Alan opened his mouth, but before he could respond, Marcus held up his phone. "You might want to check your social media," he said. "It's already out there." Alan's phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, and he excused himself quickly. Leila sighed. "This isn't over, Marcus." "No," he agreed. "Not by a long shot." At Evergreen Airlines HQ, damage control begins. Back in his office, Daniel Carter paced furiously. His PR team sat nervously, awaiting instructions. "We need a statement," he said finally. "We need to show that we're taking this seriously and find out everything we can about Clara James. If she has a history of complaints, I want to know." The PR director, Susan, nodded. "We also need to reach out to the couple directly. If we handle this poorly, it could mean lawsuits." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Let's get ahead of this. I want an investigation launched immediately." Susan hesitated. "Sir, should we consider terminating Clara?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Let's see how deep this goes. But if this is what it looks like, I won't hesitate." As the sun set, news outlets began picking up the story, and Marcus and Leila's phones buzzed nonstop with interview requests. The airline was facing a PR nightmare, and Clara James was about to realize that her actions had far-reaching consequences. And this was just the beginning. The ripple effect. Marcus and Leila sat in the back of a black sedan, the hum of the city surrounding them as they left the airport. The tension that had taken root during the flight remained, pressing against them in the quiet confines of the vehicle. Leila scrolled through her phone, the screen lighting up with notifications. Messages of support poured in, alongside a handful of hateful comments, but it was the media outlets picking up the story that caught her attention. "Marcus," she said, turning her phone toward him. "Look at this." Marcus took the phone and skimmed through the headlines. Airline faces accusations of discrimination after business class denial goes viral. Exclusive. Black couple speaks out on travel discrimination. Evergreen Airlines responds to allegations of racial bias. He sighed heavily, leaning his head against the seat. "I knew this would get attention, but I didn't expect it to blow up this fast." Leila nodded, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "People are tired, Marcus. They're tired of being treated like this, and when they see someone else go through it, it hits close to home." Their driver glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "Excuse me, I don't mean to intrude," he said hesitantly. "But I saw you two on the news just now. What happened to you was awful." Marcus offered a small, weary smile. "Thanks, man. We appreciate that." The driver shook his head. "You should fight it. Too many people let things like this slide." Leila exchanged a glance with Marcus. "Oh, we're not letting this slide," she said firmly. Meanwhile, at Evergreen Airlines headquarters, Daniel Carter sat in the boardroom, staring at the grim faces of his senior executives. The video had gone viral overnight, and the backlash was swift and unforgiving. Social media was ablaze with criticism, and major news outlets were reaching out for statements. His inbox was flooded with messages from shareholders, concerned about the potential damage to the airline's reputation. "Where are we with Clara James?" Daniel asked, rubbing his temples. Susan, the PR director, cleared her throat. "She's been suspended pending an internal investigation. HR is reviewing her record." Daniel frowned. "Any previous complaints?" Susan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "A few," she admitted, "but nothing concrete enough to warrant action before now. Most were informal grievances, passengers feeling uncomfortable with her attitude, but nothing outright discriminatory." Daniel sighed. "We can't afford to sweep this under the rug. We need to be proactive. Where's our outreach to the Thompsons?" Alan, the gate supervisor from the incident, spoke up hesitantly. "I spoke with them briefly at the airport, but I doubt they're satisfied with a simple apology." Daniel nodded. "We need a direct approach. I want a personal call set up with them. No scripted responses. We need to show them we take this seriously." Susan leaned forward. "And what about our public response?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Issue a statement acknowledging the incident and committing to a full investigation. Make it clear that discrimination of any kind won't be tolerated. In the meantime, let's get ahead of this. Offer them compensation, upgrades, whatever it takes to make things right." Susan hesitated. "Sir, some of our board members think we should wait for things to blow over before taking drastic action." Daniel's eyes darkened. "That's not an option. If we wait, we'll look complicit. I won't let this airline become another cautionary tale." Marcus and Leila's home. The phone call. By the time they reached their apartment, Leila's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unfamiliar number. She exchanged a glance with Marcus before answering. "Hello. Mrs. Thompson, this is Daniel Carter, CEO of Evergreen Airlines." Leila's eyebrows shot up, and she quickly put the phone on speaker. "Hello, Mr. Carter. My husband and I are both here." Daniel's voice was composed but serious. "First, let me say how deeply sorry I am for what happened to you both. We're currently investigating the matter, and I assure you, we're taking this very seriously." Marcus leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, with all due respect, an apology isn't enough. My wife and I were publicly humiliated. We were made to feel like criminals for simply existing in a space we rightfully belong to." "I understand," Daniel replied, "and I want to assure you that the flight attendant involved has been suspended pending investigation. We're also reviewing our training procedures to ensure nothing like this happens again." Leela crossed her arms. "You mean to tell us that after all this time, your airline still hasn't trained your staff to treat people equally?" There was a pause on the other end. "We believed our training was sufficient, but clearly, we were wrong." Marcus nodded. "We want real action, Mr. Carter, not just a PR move." Daniel hesitated before responding. "Would you be willing to meet with our diversity and inclusion team to discuss changes that could make a difference? Your experience is valuable in helping us create a better environment for everyone." Leela looked at Marcus, considering it. After a moment, she said, "We'll think about it, but we're not making any promises." "I understand," Daniel said. "In the meantime, we'd like to offer you both full refunds for your flights, along with first-class upgrades for future travel." Marcus chuckled humorously. "A refund won't erase what happened." "No, it won't," Daniel admitted. "But it's a start." Social media eruption. As news of the airline's response hit the internet, opinions were divided. Some praised the CEO's swift action, while others called it a band-aid solution. Celebrities and activists began weighing in, with hashtags like #BoycottEvergreen and #FlyWithDignity trending globally. A prominent civil rights lawyer, Jordan Matthews, tweeted, "This is more than an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a systemic issue. Marcus and Leela Thompson deserve justice, not just apologies." Meanwhile, Clara James found herself facing public scrutiny like never before. Images of her circulated online, and her personal social media accounts were flooded with hateful comments and demands for her resignation. In her small apartment, Clara stared at her phone, her hands shaking. She had always thought of herself as by the book, but now she was beginning to realize the cost of her actions. The pressure mounts. As the days passed, Evergreen Airlines found itself facing mounting pressure from advocacy groups and corporate partners demanding to see concrete changes. Internal emails were leaked, showing a history of unresolved customer complaints regarding implicit bias among staff. Daniel Carter knew that the storm was far from over. He had to act decisively, or risk losing the airline's reputation altogether. Meanwhile, Marcus and Leela prepared for their next steps, unsure whether they wanted to engage further with the airline or take legal action. Whatever they decided, one thing was clear: they weren't backing down. Building bridges and drawing lines. The next morning, Marcus and Leela sat at their kitchen table, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee hanging in the air. Their apartment, usually a sanctuary of peace, now felt heavy with the weight of recent events. The headlines, the calls, the offers, they had all come so fast. Leila scrolled through her emails while Marcus rubbed his temples, trying to sort through his thoughts. "I don't know, Leila," Marcus finally said. "Do we trust the airline to make meaningful changes, or are they just trying to cover their backs?" Leila glanced up from her laptop. "It's hard to say, but part of me feels like we need to hold them accountable. If we don't, they'll think this can just blow over." Their conversation was interrupted by another call from Emily Sanderson, the journalist who had recorded the incident. Leila answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Good morning, Emily," she greeted. "What can we do for you?" "Good morning, Leila, Marcus," Emily replied. "I just wanted to let you know the video has reached over 2 million views, and the public is rallying behind you. I've been contacted by several organizations that want to support you, including legal teams and advocacy groups. If you're open to it, I'd love to connect you." Marcus exchanged a glance with Leila. "We appreciate that, Emily. We're still figuring out our next steps, but we'll definitely consider it." "I understand," Emily said. "No pressure. Just know that you have a lot of people rooting for you." After ending the call, Marcus sighed. "It's overwhelming. Everyone seems to have an opinion about what we should do." Leila reached for his hand. We don't have to decide everything today. Let's take it one step at a time. Evergreen Airlines. The strategy meeting. Across town, Evergreen Airlines top executives convened in a conference room overlooking the city skyline. Daniel Carter stood at the head of the table, his expression grim but determined. "We're in a precarious position," he began. "Public trust in our brand is eroding, and every move we make is being scrutinized." Susan, the PR director, spoke up. "Our initial statement bought us some time, but it's clear that words alone won't cut it. The Thompsons are the face of this story, and we need to engage with them meaningfully." Daniel nodded. "I've already reached out to them, but we need more than just apologies. What concrete actions can we take to show that we're serious about change?" A younger executive, Jason, hesitated before speaking. "What if we partner with civil rights organizations to develop new training programs for our staff? Not just sensitivity training, but something deeper, implicit bias education, cultural competency workshops, and accountability measures." Susan tapped her pen against her notebook. "That's a start, but we also need visible consequences for Clara James. The public won't be satisfied unless they see that we're addressing the root cause." Daniel frowned. "I agree, but we need to be careful. Clara's actions were unacceptable, but we can't afford to look like we're scapegoating her to protect ourselves. This is about systemic change, not just one person." The room fell silent as everyone considered the gravity of the situation. Finally, Daniel said, "I want a full plan on my desk by tomorrow. This isn't just about fixing a PR problem. It's about setting a new standard for the industry." The Thompsons take a stand. Later that evening, Marcus and Leela sat in their living room, reviewing the offers and opportunities that had come their way. A civil rights lawyer, Jordan Matthews, had reached out, offering to represent them pro bono if they chose to pursue legal action. "This could send a powerful message," Jordan had said during their call. "It's not just about you. It's about every person who's been marginalized and dismissed." But there was another option on the table: collaborating with Evergreen Airlines to drive systemic change. Daniel Carter had followed up with a heartfelt email outlining his vision for a partnership. He wanted Marcus and Leela to join the airline's newly proposed Diversity Council, helping to shape policies and training programs. "I'll be honest," Daniel had written, "this incident has exposed flaws in our organization that we can no longer ignore. With your insight and leadership, we can turn this moment into a movement." Marcus leaned back on the couch, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Do you think they're serious about change, or is this just damage control?" Leela shrugged. "It could be both. But maybe we can use this opportunity to push for something real." Marcus nodded slowly. "If we do this, it's not about accepting their apology. It's about holding them accountable every step of the way. A meeting that could change everything." The following week, Marcus and Leela met with Daniel Carter and his team at Evergreen Airlines headquarters. The conference room was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Daniel greeted them warmly, his demeanor sincere but businesslike. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming," he began. "I want to start by saying how much I admire your courage. Your experience has shed light on issues we need to confront, and I'm committed to making meaningful changes." Leela didn't mince words. "We appreciate that, Mr. Carter, but we're not here to hear promises. We want to know exactly how you plan to fix this." Daniel gestured toward a screen, where a presentation outlined the airline's proposed initiatives. A partnership with civil rights organizations to develop comprehensive training programs for all employees. The establishment of a Diversity and Inclusion Council, with Marcus and Leela as co-chairs. Quarterly audits to measure progress and transparency, with reports made public. Immediate termination of employees found guilty of discriminatory behavior after thorough investigations. Marcus studied the proposal carefully. "This is a good start," he said. "But it's just that, a start. How do we know you'll follow through?" Daniel met his gaze. "Because we'll be holding ourselves accountable to you and the public. If we fail, it won't just be our reputation on the line. It'll be our entire business. After a lengthy discussion, Marcus and Leela agreed to collaborate with Evergreen Airlines under the condition that their involvement wouldn't be used as a PR stunt. "We're here to make a difference, not to clean up your mess," Leela said firmly. Daniel nodded. "Understood. Let's make this count." The public reaction. When Evergreen Airlines announced its partnership with Marcus and Leela, reactions were mixed. Some applauded the Thompsons for using their platform to drive change, while others accused them of selling out. On social media, Marcus posted a thoughtful response. "Change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen in isolation. We chose to work with Evergreen Airlines because we believe in turning pain into progress. This isn't about letting anyone off the hook. It's about building a better future for everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong." The post went viral, sparking a broader conversation about accountability, allyship, and the power of collaboration. As the dust began to settle, Marcus and Leela knew that their journey was far from over. But for the first time in weeks, they felt a sense of purpose and the hope that their experience could lead to lasting change. The cost of change. The days following the Thompsons' decision to collaborate with Evergreen Airlines were anything but smooth. As news of their involvement spread, so did the scrutiny. Social media buzzed with debates, and news anchors dissected every detail of the partnership. Some hailed Marcus and Leela as pioneers, stepping up to create change from within. Others, however, saw them as sellouts, arguing that they were letting the airline off too easily. Sitting in their living room, Marcus scrolled through Twitter, his brow furrowed in frustration. Marcus and Leela Thompson went from standing up for their rights to helping the very company that humiliated them. Guess everyone has a price. Instead of lawsuits, they're doing workshops. Evergreen Airlines should be boycotted, not reformed. He sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. "I knew people would have opinions, but this feels personal." Leela sat beside him, holding his hand. "We expected this, remember. Change doesn't happen without resistance." Marcus looked at her, his eyes filled with doubt. "What if we made the wrong call, Leela? What if working with them makes us look weak?" Leela squeezed his hand tightly. "We're not weak. We're strategic. And we're doing this for people like us who don't get a voice. If we can make the airline better, isn't it worth it?" Despite her reassuring words, she couldn't ignore the unease settling in her chest. The pressure was mounting, and they both felt it. The first meeting. Facing the skeptics. Their first official meeting with the newly formed Diversity and Inclusion Council took place in Evergreen Airlines headquarters. The room was filled with executives, HR representatives, and a few external diversity consultants brought in for credibility. Marcus and Leela walked in, their presence turning heads. Some executives looked uncomfortable, while others offered polite but forced smiles. Daniel Carter stood at the front, ready to welcome everyone. "Thank you all for being here. I'd like to formally introduce Marcus and Leela Thompson, whose experience has catalyzed our efforts to do better." A few murmurs rippled through the room, but Marcus stepped forward confidently. "We're here because we believe change is possible," he began, making direct eye contact with the crowd. "But we're not here to rubber stamp empty promises. We're here to ensure that real, lasting improvements happen, starting now." Leela followed. "We know this isn't going to be easy. We know some of you might not agree with how things are being handled, but we're here to hold this company accountable, not to be your PR stunt." Susan, the PR director, cleared her throat. "We all appreciate your commitment, but I'd like to clarify. Our focus is on the future. We can't dwell on the past." Leela's expression hardened. "The past is the reason we're in this room, Susan. Ignoring it isn't an option." An awkward silence filled the air, and Daniel intervened. "We're here to learn and to act. Let's get started." The fight for meaningful change. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that not everyone was on board. Some mid-level managers raised concerns about unnecessary changes, while a few employees expressed skepticism that diversity training would really fix anything. Marcus and Leela listened patiently, but didn't back down. One of the senior pilots, an older man named Richard, leaned forward. "Look, I'm all for fairness, but I've been flying for 30 years without an issue. We follow policies and procedures. Maybe this was just one bad apple." Leela, keeping her composure, responded, "It's never just one bad apple. It's a culture that allows those apples to thrive. We're not here to punish anyone. We're here to help make sure situations like ours don't happen again." Richard crossed his arms but said nothing further. By the end of the meeting, it was clear there was a long road ahead. But Marcus and Leela left feeling determined, knowing they had planted the first seeds of change. Clara James speaks out. Meanwhile, Clara James, the flight attendant at the center of the controversy, had been noticeably silent. Until now. Sitting in her modest apartment, she stared at the camera nervously as a journalist conducted an exclusive interview with her. "I never intended to discriminate against anyone," Clara said, her voice trembling. "I was following procedures, and I guess I made assumptions I shouldn't have." The interviewer leaned in. "Do you think Evergreen Airlines is treating you fairly?" Clara hesitated, clearly struggling with her emotions. "I think I made a mistake, and I need to own up to it. But I also think the airline is using me as an example to protect themselves." Her words ignited further debate online. Some sympathized with her, while others saw her response as an attempt to avoid accountability. Leela watched the interview from their living room, shaking her head. She's still not really taking responsibility. Marcus nodded. "She's blaming the system, but she was part of it. We all have to do better." The turning point. A new incident. Just when Evergreen Airlines thought they were regaining control, another incident surfaced. A passenger, an older black woman, reported that she had been treated unfairly by another flight crew member. This time, it involved being asked to check her carry-on while other passengers were allowed to keep theirs. The news hit the media instantly, and Marcus and Leela were flooded with messages asking if they were aware of the situation. Marcus clenched his fists. "This just proves our point. This isn't about one flight attendant. It's a systemic issue." Daniel Carter called them immediately. "We need to meet. We can't afford to let this spiral." At the emergency meeting, Marcus and Leela confronted the airline leadership head-on. "If you're serious about change," Leela said, "this is your chance to prove it. Don't just respond. Take proactive measures." The room was tense, but Daniel nodded. "You're right. It's time for stronger action." That day, the airline committed to implementing mandatory implicit bias training within the next 3 months and launching an independent audit to evaluate systemic issues across all departments. Personal sacrifices and growing tensions. As the media storm raged on, Marcus and Leela found themselves stretched thin. Marcus, a software engineer, struggled to balance work and activism, while Leela, an entrepreneur, saw her business suffering from the constant distractions. "Babe, I can't keep ignoring work emails," Marcus admitted one night. "I love what we're doing, but it's taking over our lives." Leela sighed. "I know, but this is bigger than us." Despite the growing strain, they both knew they couldn't back down. Their story had become a symbol, and people were counting on them. The road ahead. As Evergreen Airlines continued rolling out changes, Marcus and Leela braced themselves for what was next. Would the airline follow through on their commitments? Would the public perception shift? Most importantly, would their efforts lead to tangible improvements for future passengers? The journey was far from over, but one thing was clear. Marcus and Leela had become more than just passengers on a flight gone wrong. They were catalysts for change, and they weren't stopping now. The unraveling pressure and unforeseen consequences. As the weeks stretched on, Marcus and Leela found themselves in a whirlwind of meetings, media appearances, and personal sacrifices. The pressure was mounting, not only from the public, but also within their own relationship. The cause that had brought them closer was now pulling them apart in ways they hadn't anticipated. Late one night, Leela sat at the kitchen counter, staring at her laptop. Her inbox was flooded with emails, some supportive, some hateful, and many filled with unsolicited advice. Marcus walked in, rubbing his eyes, clearly exhausted from another long day of balancing his job and their advocacy work. "You're still up?" he asked, concern etched across his face. Leela sighed, closing her laptop. "I can't sleep. It feels like, no matter how much we do, it's never enough." Marcus sat beside her, taking her hand. "I get it, babe. But we need to find balance. We can't fix the entire world overnight." Leela bit her lip, staring down at their intertwined fingers. "But what if we're the only ones willing to try?" Marcus exhaled, his exhaustion evident. "And what if trying too hard breaks us?" The weight of his words lingered in the air, unspoken fears creeping in. They were fighting for a cause they believed in, but at what cost? Navigating internal resistance at Evergreen Airlines. Meanwhile, within Evergreen Airlines, resistance to the proposed changes was growing. While Daniel Carter, the CEO, was committed to reform, several senior executives remained hesitant. They feared the financial implications and worried about alienating certain customer demographics who might view the changes as unnecessary. In a closed-door meeting, Susan, the PR director, voiced her concerns. "Daniel, let's be realistic here. The public outcry is dying down, and with the recent media focus shifting elsewhere, do we really need to overhaul our entire internal culture?" Daniel leaned forward, his expression firm. "Yes, Susan. If we don't, we'll find ourselves right back in this mess when the next incident happens." Richard, the senior pilot who had voiced skepticism earlier, chimed in. "Look, I get the need for training, but what about us? Are we being punished for one person's mistake? There's a difference between a few bad apples and saying our whole system is flawed." Daniel met his gaze evenly. "If our system allows discrimination, whether intentional or not, then yes, it is flawed, and it's our responsibility to fix it." The tension in the room was palpable. Some executives nodded in agreement, while others exchanged skeptical glances. The divide was clear. Progress would not come easy. An unexpected ally. Despite the resistance, Marcus and Leela found an unexpected ally within the airline. Sarah Lynn, a mid-level HR manager who had been quietly working behind the scenes to advocate for change long before the Thompsons incident. After a particularly heated diversity council meeting, Sarah approached them in the hallway. "I just wanted to say, I appreciate what you're doing," she said, her voice sincere. "I've been fighting for better training programs for years, but it always got buried under more pressing issues. Maybe now, they'll finally listen." Leela smiled, feeling a flicker of hope. "We're glad to have someone on the inside who believes in this as much as we do." Sarah nodded. "I'll do what I can to push things forward internally. But be careful. There are people here who just want to make this go away, not actually fix it." Marcus and Leela exchanged a knowing look. They had sensed the undercurrents of resistance, but hearing it confirmed made the challenge ahead even clearer. A family divided. Back at home, the couple faced another battle, convincing their own families that they had made the right decision. Over Sunday dinner at Marcus' parents' house, his father, a retired civil rights attorney, voiced his doubts. "You two are doing good work," Mr. Thompson said, slicing into his roast chicken. "But working with them, that's a dangerous game. What if they use you and toss you aside when the public forgets?" Leela, sitting beside Marcus, set down her fork. "We've thought about that. But if we walk away now, nothing changes." Marcus' mother chimed in gently. "We're proud of you both, but your well-being matters too. Don't let this consume you." Marcus nodded, appreciating their concern. "We're trying to find balance. But right now, we need to see this through." His father sighed, tapping his fingers against the table. "Just promise me you'll watch your backs." A disturbing threat. That promise would soon be put to the test. A week later, an anonymous email arrived in Leela's inbox. The subject line read, "Stay in your lane." The message itself was chilling. You and your husband need to stop poking around where you don't belong. Some things don't need to change. Walk away before it's too late." Layla's heart pounded as she read the words over and over. She immediately showed it to Marcus, who clenched his fists in anger. "This isn't just pushback," he said. "This is a threat." They debated whether to report it to the authorities, but Marcus ultimately insisted, "We're not going to be bullied into silence." The police took their reports seriously but warned them that proving the source would be difficult. Meanwhile, Evergreen Airlines increased their security protocols, and Daniel personally assured them that their safety was a priority. Moving forward with caution. Despite the threats and the doubts, Marcus and Leila pressed on. They launched a series of employee town halls, where staff could share their experiences and concerns anonymously. The stories they heard were eye-opening: microaggressions, overlooked promotions, and subtle discrimination that had persisted for years. One employee, a young black woman named Tanya, shared her experience with the airline's hiring process. "I had to prove myself twice as much as my colleagues. I was constantly told I needed more experience when I had already been doing the job unofficially for months." Listening to stories like Tanya's only fueled Marcus and Leila's determination. They documented everything and pushed for policy changes to address hiring biases and promotional pathways. A critical decision approaches. As their efforts began to gain traction, Daniel Carter presented them with a pivotal choice. "We want to make this permanent," he said during a private meeting. "We're offering you both official positions within our diversity and inclusion division." Marcus and Leila were stunned. The offer came with generous salaries and the opportunity to directly influence company policies. But it also meant stepping fully into the corporate world they had been fighting against. "We need time to think," Leila said, her mind racing with the implications. Later that night, Marcus voiced his concerns. "Taking this role means becoming part of the system. Are we ready for that?" Leila, deep in thought, responded, "Or maybe it means changing the system from within." As they weighed their options, they realized their journey was reaching a crossroads. Would they take the offer and work within Evergreen Airlines to drive change, or would they continue fighting from the outside, unrestrained, but with fewer resources? The answer would determine not just their future, but the future of countless others. The legacy of change. In the weeks that followed Evergreen Airlines' offer to Marcus and Leila, the couple found themselves standing at a crossroads. The weight of the decision pressed on them like never before. Accepting meant stepping into the belly of the corporate beast, navigating politics, and risking their integrity. Declining meant maintaining their independence, but potentially losing the momentum they had fought so hard to build. Late one evening, as they sat in their small but cozy living room, a gentle rain pattered against the windows. The soft glow of their laptops illuminated their thoughtful faces. Marcus sighed, leaning back on the couch. "Every time I think about taking this job, I wonder, will we actually make a difference, or will we just get lost in red tape?" Leila tapped her fingers against her mug, deep in thought. "I get it, but maybe being on the inside is the only way to enforce real policies. If we don't do it, someone else will, someone who might not have the same passion or experience." He looked at her, admiration in his eyes. "So, you're leaning toward saying yes?" Leila hesitated, then nodded. "I think so. But only if we negotiate on our terms. We can't afford to be figureheads." They spent the next few days consulting with mentors, legal advisors, and trusted friends. With each conversation, their vision became clearer. They would accept, but with a clear set of demands: full autonomy in shaping policies, regular performance audits, and direct access to the board of directors. Finally, they drafted a counteroffer and scheduled a meeting with Daniel Carter. The negotiation table. The boardroom was cold and clinical, but Leila and Marcus sat tall, exuding confidence as Daniel and a team of executives filed in. Daniel smiled warmly. "I'm glad you both are here. We're excited about what's ahead." Leila slid the counteroffer across the polished table. "We are too, but we want to ensure our roles have real impact." Susan, the PR director, raised an eyebrow as she scanned the document. "Quarterly performance audits. Board access. That's ambitious." Marcus didn't flinch. "It's necessary. We can't do this halfway." Daniel nodded slowly, appreciating their resolve. "I respect this, and I believe we can make it work." After tense back-and-forth discussions, Evergreen agreed to most of their terms, with a few compromises. Marcus and Leela were officially appointed as co-directors of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was a landmark moment, not just for them, but for the airline industry. A new beginning with challenges. Their first weeks in the role were a whirlwind of activity. They reviewed internal reports, identified key problem areas, and rolled out mandatory diversity training across departments. However, resistance persisted. At a staff town hall, a middle-aged white male pilot stood up, visibly agitated. "I've been here for 25 years, and I've never had a complaint. Why do we suddenly need all these policies? Are you saying we've been doing everything wrong?" Leela responded calmly but firmly. "We're saying there's always room for improvement. Just because something hasn't directly affected you doesn't mean it hasn't affected others." Another employee, a young Latina woman from ground operations, spoke up. "Honestly, I'm glad this is happening. I have been overlooked for promotions for years, and I know I'm not the only one." The conversations were uncomfortable but necessary. The media spotlight returns. As word of their efforts spread, the media once again turned its attention to them. Some outlets celebrated Evergreen's bold new direction, while others criticized it as performative activism. One particularly scathing opinion piece read, "Evergreen Airlines is bending over backward for optics, but will real change happen, or is this just another PR stunt?" Leela tossed the newspaper onto the table. "I swear, no matter what we do, it's never enough for some people." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That's not why we're doing this. We're not here for their approval. We're here for progress." Despite the outside noise, the internal changes continued. They introduced anonymous reporting tools, bias awareness workshops, and a mentorship program aimed at advancing underrepresented employees. Slowly, shifts in culture began to take root. A reunion with Clara James. One unexpected development came when Clara James, the former flight attendant whose actions had triggered the entire controversy, reached out. She requested a private meeting, and after some deliberation, Marcus and Leela agreed. Sitting across from them in a small conference room, Clara looked nervous but determined. "I wanted to apologize again, but I also wanted to ask, is there any way I can help?" Leela studied her carefully. "What changed?" Clara exhaled. "After everything, I did a lot of soul-searching. I realized I had unconscious biases I didn't even recognize. I want to learn, and if possible, I want to help others avoid the mistakes I made." Marcus exchanged a glance with Leela before nodding. "We believe in second chances, Clara, but this won't be easy." Clara was eventually brought on as a speaker for the company's internal education programs, sharing her experience and growth journey. Her story resonated with many, serving as a reminder that people could change if given the opportunity and the right support. Pushing the boundaries. With their internal initiatives gaining traction, Marcus and Leela began pushing for broader industry-wide changes. They proposed an initiative called Wings of Inclusion, a coalition of major airlines committed to addressing racial and gender disparities across the aviation sector. At an industry conference, they presented their findings and proposals. While some executives applauded their efforts, others were skeptical. One airline CEO remarked, "We have our own policies in place. Why should we align with your initiative?" Leela smiled. "Because passengers don't just fly with one airline. They expect consistency, fairness, and respect wherever they go." The initiative gained traction, and within months, several airlines had signed on, agreeing to standardize diversity metrics and accountability measures. The personal cost of success. While their professional lives were flourishing, the strain on their personal lives deepened. Marcus' parents voiced concerns about the growing risks they faced, From public backlash to corporate politics. "I just worry that you're sacrificing too much," his mother said one evening over dinner. "We're proud of you, but don't forget to take care of yourselves too." Marcus and Leela reassured them, but deep down, they knew they were running on empty. Late-night emails, early morning meetings, and constant pressure left little time for themselves. One night, as they sat on their balcony, Marcus took Leela's hand. "We need to find a way to keep us in all this." She leaned into him. "We will. We just have to remember why we started this journey in the first place." The road ahead. As the first year of their tenure approached, Evergreen Airlines reported a 30% increase in employee satisfaction related to diversity and inclusion efforts. Customer complaints related to discrimination dropped significantly, and the airline was recognized for its progressive policies. Despite the progress, Marcus and Leela knew their work was far from done. Policies could change, but true cultural transformation took time. Standing at the gate of an upcoming flight, Leela looked around at the diverse group of passengers boarding. A year ago, this scene had been the site of their humiliation. Now, it was a symbol of their resilience. Marcus squeezed her hand. "We're making the difference." Leela smiled, "And we're just getting started." As they boarded their flight, they knew their journey was far from over. But for the first time, they felt they were flying toward a future they had helped shape.